he can't help himself but emotionally react to things. One of the things that he's a narcissistic sociopath. That's the thing everyone has to kind of get used to. It's the reason why you cannot normalize him. You cannot treat him like a normal human being, because he's not.
American lawyer George Conway, known for his apparent allergy to Donald Trump, has spoken out again. This time, his outrage was sparked by Trump's attempts to bash the law firm Weiss. Yes, the very same one that can be found on the list of respected law firms, if anyone still respects such lists. Conway, as usual, did not limit himself to dry legal analysis. He, one might say, staged a public dressing down in response to the president's antics. His emotionality is, of course, on par with a morning talk show, but overall the point is clear. In his opinion, when a former president starts picking fights with lawyers, it's no longer about politics. It's about hysteria, especially when it comes to a firm that, God forgive me, was doing ordinary legal work and refused to dance to someone else's tune. So yes, George Conway is back on the air, back against Trump, back on the offensive, and oddly enough, he sounds reasonable again. Well, by the standards of American political cuisine. Conway, a lawyer, Trump critic, and by all accounts a man with a very delicate nervous disposition, gave an interview on a podcast that quickly went viral. Not because it contained any legal revelations, but because he cried. Yes, a grown man, a lawyer, cried on live television while talking about how Donald Trump, the former president and perpetually aggrieved showman, had once again decided to stage a lynching, this time against the law firm Weiss, Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison.
It's extortion, and it is basically just pitiful capitulation.
The reason for the emotions was not just the Trump administration's attack on this firm, but a whole campaign accusing the lawyers of allegedly attempting to undermine constitutional freedoms. Translated from Trumpese, they dared to participate in proceedings against those who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, the very same people who decided to play capture democracy under MAGA flags. For this, Weiss was accused of undermining the American elections because, as we all know, in Trump's logic, obeying the law is tantamount to treason.
This is an administration that is punishing people because the president is a convicted felon and is angry that he was almost brought to justice, and he wants to inflict harm on the government, and also his people he wants to inflict harm on our legal system, and he also wants to deter people from fighting back to all the illegal things he's doing.
But let's get back to the tears. Conway became emotional when recalling a letter from the two granddaughters of Judge Simon Rifkin, one of the firm's founders. The letter, he said, criticized Trump and defended Weiss's professional integrity, reminding him that the legal profession is not a service provider for politicians, but an institution that sometimes even tries to do its job. "I'm getting teary-eyed right now," he said, and apparently he really was. And we were left with a strange but sadly telling picture. In the US, to simply defend the law, you have to be either brave, very tired, or willing to cry on a podcast.
What we're seeing now is, as you put it, an implosion. And this, I believe, is what ultimately was always going to happen, the final implosion of Donald Trump. I mean, it's like Hitler, when Hitler was moving around divisions that didn't exist in the last 10 days of the war in the Führer bunker. I mean, he has completely lost it.
George Conway, a man who still seems to care about what is happening to democracy in the country, recounted how he couldn't help but write a letter to one of the granddaughters of the late Judge Simon Rifkin. And no, he doesn't know her. He doesn't know any of these women. But as he said in an interview, he was so moved by their letter, the one in which the granddaughters politely but firmly put Donald Trump in his place for attacking the law firm Weiss, that he decided to thank them personally. 2 words: bravo, thank you. Modest, to the point, and apparently with a lump in his throat. They want to stand for something, he explains. People want to stand for something. Well, in an era when the former president is constantly accusing someone of undermining the Constitution, standing up for the law is almost a heroic act, especially considering that we're not talking about some radical activists, but a law firm that dared, crime of all crimes, to do its job. Seek accountability for the storming of the Capitol. Conway just wanted these women to know that their voices weren't lost in the noise, that there are those who hear them, who value their integrity and respect the memory of the man who laid the foundations of a firm that is now once again forced to defend the very idea of justice, against the backdrop of a political circus in which Trump remains the ringmaster.
I was sort of far along there, and then I just started having this queasy feeling like I don't really want to work in this administration, because I was just watching the shit show that was going on with the...
"We're all in this together," said George Conway, addressing not a support group but the entire country, where democracy seems to be in a coma but is still showing signs of life. "This is a fight for something bigger than profit for a partner," he added, reminding everyone that not all legal work boils down to billing $600 an hour. According to him, this is a fight for the very essence of the rule of law. What angers him most is that many people simply don't care. This is hardly surprising given who is currently in the White House and what his priorities are. Spoiler alert, the law is not at the top of the list.
He actually believes some of this insanity that comes out of his mouth. Not only is there no filter, there's nothing up here. There's nothing up here that represents any version of reality or sensible thought. I mean, being president, you have to actually play multi-dimensional chess. He's not even playing tic-tac-toe.
Conway was deeply moved by a letter from the two granddaughters of Judge Simon Rifkind, one of the founders of Paul Weiss. These women are not politicians, activists, or lawyers. They are simply citizens who care. Their letter defended the firm's honor and, more broadly, reminded us that, strange as it may seem, laws must work even when the person sitting in the Oval Office views the Constitution as a list of inconveniences. After all the fuss, when the law firm was effectively publicly pressured for daring to participate in legal proceedings against the instigators of the Capitol riot, the Trump administration, yes, the current one, not the previous one, backed down. Why? Well, Paul, Weiss agreed to provide $40 million worth of free legal services. This apparently was the compromise that allowed the lawyer-hating president to save face, at least in front of his audience. The result? The order has been revoked. The scandal remains. And with it, another reason to ask, is this democracy at all, or are we just rehearsing authoritarianism in a lighthearted guise? Conway seems to have already given his answer. And tears are, in fact, quite appropriate here.
What they are doing here is just, it is just purely contemptuous of the courts. And they're doing it, this is the same pattern of, in this case, turning the prisoners over to DOD. In the AARP case we just talked about, presenting, oh, it's premature, when they've got these people on buses to the airport.
Conway couldn't resist speaking up when Trump once again decided that his thoughts were worthy of a tweet. And, as is usually the case, he didn't just spout nonsense, but something that could be described as an alarm bell with a hint of popcorn. This time, the movie-loving president decided that Hollywood is the #1 problem in the country. In his latest address to the nation via Twitter, which, of course, has long since become his press service, blog, and apparently psychotherapy, Trump claimed that foreign countries are poaching the best people from the U.S. film industry. This, he said, is a national security issue. How does he plan to solve it? With import duties on foreign films, of course. Because apparently, Fellini, Bergman, and the entire French New Wave are saboteurs, and Netflix will now have to pay a tax for every British accent.
I think everybody overthinks this guy. There's no strategy. There is no thought. And the brand is just him. He lives in this world where there's just him.
Conway, a man with a remnant of common sense and a keen sense of sarcasm, reacted immediately. "I think Ladbrokes should start taking bets on whether Donald Trump will survive until January 20, 2026, without being sent to a psychiatric hospital," he wrote. Although, to be honest, he probably meant 2028, or he hopes it will all be over sooner. And it's not just that Trump's tweet is yet another intellectual meltdown. It looks particularly ridiculous against the backdrop of everything that is happening in the world. The US economy is teetering like an IKEA shelf that hasn't been screwed together properly. There are images of Ukraine and Gaza on TV, trade wars with China, and the federal government is on the verge of internal self-destruction. And here, in the midst of all this, instead of doing something useful, Trump is writing about tariffs on movies. Because apparently, national security is now a fight against foreign screenwriters and cameramen.
You don't want to diagnose him, but I think if you look at the diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, he fits every single one of them. It's like the criteria were made to describe him.
To say that this looks inappropriate is an understatement. It's like a president looking at a burning house and asking, "What color curtains should we hang when we fix the roof?" Well, Conway, as usual, spoke for those who still have the ability to see that reality is becoming increasingly absurd. Does Trump really think that his tweets are the brilliant maneuvers that will distract the people from real problems? Because if you're going to try to immortalize your reputation, it's definitely not through meaningless statements that only contribute to the economy continuing to slide into the abyss. The other day, Trump released his latest tweet masterpiece, and it certainly deserves special attention. "The movie industry in America is dying a very fast death," he wrote, as if Hollywood were not a multi-billion-dollar industry but some kind of bankrupt shop. And of course, he followed that up with, "Other countries are offering all kinds of incentives to take our filmmakers and studios away from the United States. Hollywood and many other areas in the US are being hollowed out. This is a concerted effort by other countries and therefore a national security threat. Because why not? Not missiles with nuclear warheads, but Swedish tax breaks for filmmakers. That's the main threat to the US. And yes, it's still related to national security, according to Trump."
Terry Schreckman wants to know from you, George, do you expect Trump to target you and other staff of the Lincoln Project? And if so, do you have a defense plan?
I don't have a defense plan other than whatever he pulls up is going to be meritless. My finances are simple. It won't, I don't fear him. And I think one of the things that that people don't quite understand about Trump, but they really should, is the fact that he's a bully and he wants to pick on people who won't fight back.
And what about his decision? It's simple. I authorize the Department of Commerce and the United States Trade Representative to immediately begin the process of imposing a 109% tariff on any and all films entering our country that are produced abroad. It sounds like something a person who has decided that the sectors responsible for science, the economy, and international relations can wait would say. The main thing is the films that we will make. Apparently, Trump expected the entire nation to immediately remember how important it is to support Hollywood, as if simply making movies even more expensive would solve the problem. But wait, against this backdrop, a tweet from Joe Walsh, a former MAGA supporter who decided that Trump also needs to be exposed, sounded like a diagnosis. "We need to shine a light on Trump's cognitive decline, massive coverage, because it's a problem. A huge problem," he wrote. And we all know that when someone decides to talk about things like this publicly, it's not just a statement, it's a warning.
Donald Trump, we know, is basically a Matryoshka doll, how do you say that, of lies and mendacity. Basically, he'll lie, then he'll lie about lying, then he'll lie about lying about lying, and then he'll lie about lying about lying about lying. And that's what he does all the time. And that's what he's doing here.
But here's an interesting point. As usual, the national media is turning a blind eye to all this. It is not being discussed in the same way as every tweet from Biden, where it is essential to find a mistake, even if there isn't one. Instead, everything Trump does is like New Year's fireworks, which explode loudly against the backdrop of all the other disasters in the world, but quickly fade away. Conway couldn't help himself and said something to Trump's colleagues that seems obvious to many. Yes, of course, and JD. "Vance is a disgrace to the law school I attended." Well, if you thought that everything that comes out of Trump's mouth and his entourage is standard fare, here's another dose of unpleasant truth from Conway, who wasn't just offended, but pointed out how things really are. Conway continued his thought. "But the thing is, he's telling us what we should have known all along. And I said that last week." Yes, Conway seems to be riding a wave of disappointment, adding more confidence with every word. These aren't just words. They're the maneuvers of a political chess player who understands what's going on behind the scenes. They're not going to obey the court's orders, that's the rub. From time to time, when the authorities don't want to follow the law, they simply decide that it doesn't suit them.
Okay? I don't want to see a Republican Party led by a fascist, but he is a fascist. He cannot help but be a fascist. His personality disorders make him a fascist. He does not care about anyone else. He does not care about the rule of law. He does not He does not care about justice. He does not care about right and wrong.
Essentially, everything Conway is saying boils down to one thing. They have decided that they are going to expand the boundaries of executive power. In other words, they are not just playing by the rules, they are rewriting them. This includes seizing powers from Congress, which, according to the Constitution, should be the main force in the legislative process. And this is not just a coincidence. They are violating the Constitution, the text of the Constitution, and the issue of birthright citizenship, Conway added, as if anyone actually doubted their ability to ignore basic laws. And the cherry on top? They are violating the text of the statutes by making Doge run around in circles, and everything they've done, presidential decrees. Well, if anyone thought that all we were seeing was just another political disaster, Conway reminds us that Trump and his team are something much more dangerous. This isn't just playing by different rules, it's going beyond any kind of legitimacy. This is how the situation is viewed by those who are used to following the Constitution rather than bending it to suit their needs. It's surprising how openly and unabashedly Conway talks about what's really going on in the corridors of power.
You cannot go broke betting on the spinelessness of Republican elected politicians. And until they fear someone more greatly than they fear Donald Trump, they're going to continue to do what they're going to do.
And so we come to what happens when those in power start to overreach, ignoring the laws and rules that hold not only politics, but the very foundations of democracy in check. Conway and his criticism are not just rhetoric to remind us that it is important to follow the Constitution. They are a wake-up call. We see how easy it is to stray from the principles of the rule of law if we are not vigilant and do not resist. The moral here is simple. Laws are not just words on paper, they are the foundation of all our rights and freedoms. When these laws begin to be violated, when institutions of power begin to work for their own interests rather than for the good of the people, it threatens the very structure of democracy. We are all part of this process, and it is important to remember that the world we live in tomorrow depends on our attention, our civic engagement, and our willingness to stand up for principles. And if anyone decides that the Constitution is just an old document that is not suitable for modern times, we must remind them that without respect for these foundations, there can be neither stability nor justice.
I say, oh yeah, Donald Trump. And I answer the phone, and Donald Trump says, you were great. This was you have an amazing speaking voice. What kind of law do you practice? You know, really amazing, terrific, great thing you did.